Hey guys, my guest tonight is David Barnett, also known as Dave the Mystic, is going to be here talking about heaven and extraterrestrials. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I hope you said you're doing great. I'm doing great. Got the AC back on because it's starting to warm up again. Probably another couple weeks of this tremendous heat, and then we will be done here in Sacramento with the heat. Then I'll be complaining it's too bloody cold. Anyway, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state. And that means if you have a paranormal need, let me shift some stuff here. Okay. And that means if you have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It may take us a while because California is a big state, but we can definitely get to you. Tonight we're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and Twitter. And if you want to find us over there, you can find us on Facebook under California Haunts. You can find us on YouTube under California Haunts or California Haunts Radio. I'll give you a link to that, youtube.com/@California Haunts Radio. Or you can find us on Twitter as California Haunts, Twitch we're Cal Haunts, and over at TikTok we are California Haunts. So that's the way to find us. Now, if you're watching from Facebook tonight, a lot of you are, if you haven't done so already, please hit that follow button. Really appreciate it. Always looking for followers. And during the show, if you like what you hear, give me a thumbs up, show me some love, happy faces, that kind of thing. Because what that does is it puts us up in the algorithm. Facebook sees that and kind of promotes my show. And it puts us further out there, meaning more people can watch the show. Get a look at us. So that'd be great. And also, if you're home with somebody and they haven't been watching this, see if, they might be interested in watching this little show, right? Right? Okay. Same thing with YouTube. If you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. We're looking for subscribers. I'm 320 away from hitting that 1,000 mark. And I'm real excited about that. I can just barely contain myself. I'm so excited about that. Also, same thing for YouTube. If you like what you see and hear, thumbs up, smileys, hearts, show me some love, because that works. The algorithm works in a similar way over on YouTube. And also, commenting on the show, that helps a lot too, to put us up higher in the algorithm. Okay, we're waiting for Dave to come on, and something might have come up because we were all confirmed up. So we'll give him a few minutes, and if he doesn't come on, I will just commence to continuing my read of Marion Reeder's book tonight and take care of it that way. Just a quick FYI about tomorrow night. I don't know if I'm going to be live for sure. I may have a guest, I may not. But the problem is that I'm going to be getting an MRI tomorrow afternoon, and because of my hearing issues, my equilibrium is off. And when I get done with those things, I'm just all thrown off and dizzy. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow night. But anyway, I'm glad to be here. I hope you're glad to be here as well. And I'm looking forward to talking with Dave. If everything goes well, something might have come up with him. But either way, we'll be together tonight. I'll just read that. But that book is terrific, so I can't deny the book. Things that are coming up for us. Donna Vold is going to be rejoining us in October because she is the one that draws the psychic, uses her ability to draw faces of people's relatives that are deceased. And she does like posters and stuff for people. So it's going to be interesting to talk with her. And I think we're going to have a contest to raise some money for the team where Dawn is going to do a portrait for somebody. And so we'll sell tickets for that and kind of make it a real fun deal. Things coming up. California Haunts has just gained some more team members, so we're going to be having a big new team meeting over at one of the restaurants here and get to know everybody. And we're going to start getting out to do more investigating for the first time in a while, and I'm real excited about that as well. So I'll be sharing those with you guys a lot, and I'll be doing a lot of them on lives for you guys. Okay, so it's going to be interesting. So you got to keep up with us. Also, what else? Fall's coming, Halloween time. We're looking at doing some investigations live as well for Halloween, and we may even be on a couple of TV shows, a couple of TV news shows here and there. So we'll see again how that plays out. Newspapers and whatnot. That's the first time in a long time that we're going to be getting back out to do this stuff. So it's going to be interesting because it's a whole new crew, new equipment, everything. So yeah, we're going to be doing that. if you guys are interested in meditation, and meditation is good for your health and well-being. I do have a meditation club that's where you pay $25 a month, and we do guided meditations, 3 to 4 guided meditations a week. And it's really, if you're into that sort of thing, or you want to learn how to wind down, and you're having trouble winding down after work, meditation is a good way to do that. So if you're interested in that, head on over to the California Haunts meetup page. All you have to do is type in California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team meetup. It'll take you right over there, and click on events, and you will see it. It's listed as one event, but it is monthly, so that $25 covers you for 31 days, and you get to spend time with me doing guided meditations. So if you're interested in that, feel free to do that. Let me check my email real quick, and I don't know what's going on with Dave, because he was confirmed and ready to go. Okay, so he's there. So I'm just wondering, okay. He just acknowledged the email, so hopefully he's coming in. It's going to be one of those days. I'm going to, I'm going to resend the link for this thing, because maybe I sent him the wrong link. So give me a second. Because I've had weird things that happen. So let me get him a link. It's just one of those days. Mercury in retrograde, and it's still going like the Energizer Bunny. Okay, let me see if I can send him a link. Let me make sure maybe he didn't get the link. You never know. There's just weird things that go on all the time. And let me fire this off to him. Oh, there he is. And our guest is here. David Barnett has been on our show before. And we had a lot of fun with him last time. And this time I think we're going to learn a few new things. We're going to be talking about heaven and extraterrestrials tonight. Whoa, there I went. And so the internet starts up. It's like a no-win scenario in this day. But we're going to be talking about heaven and extraterrestrials tonight. So I think you guys are going to enjoy the conversation. And let me go ahead and bring him in. Here we go.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've seen you.
It has. It has. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. The show's starting to take off really well, and it's a gradual process of build up. Because when people say, "Oh yeah, go on YouTube and stuff," you can just boom, boom, boom. It's a gradual process, but it's exciting because the numbers are growing every day, and so I'm really excited about that.
Oh, great! I'm glad to hear that. Good for you.
So, for the people that haven't seen you yet, tell us about you.
I have a very interesting background. I kind of have a foot in both worlds. I grew up knowing that I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I discovered electronics in fifth grade, which for me, that was about 1965. So that was a few years ago. And I continued on with that path and ended up becoming an electrical engineer and an aerospace engineer. Along the way, my dad was an Episcopal priest and an engineer. My parents divorced when I was around 11. And not too long after, my mother discovered astrology, and she started using me as her test subject for a lot of different psychic things. And because my older brothers, wouldn't have anything to do with it. They all thought she was Madame Zelda, and they wanted to get her a turban with a jewel in the front. And so I was open to it. But I went off and did my college thing and got my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering. And I grew up in Wichita, and I ended up back in Wichita after working at General Motors for a couple of years. Worked at Boeing in Wichita, and then decided I really didn't want to live in live in Wichita or work for Boeing the rest of my life. And I came out to Denver to work for Martin Marietta. Well, in 1983, I went back to my 10th high school reunion, and I ran into an old friend named Barry. And Barry asked me if I'd become an electrical engineer like I had expected. And I said, yeah. And he said, do you think it's possible to change things at a distance? And he kept talking in kind of a roundabout way, and he wouldn't come out with it. And I finally said, okay, Barry, tell me what's going on. He said, well, I'd rather show you. So we went to his house. He invited me over. And when we first got out of the car, he walked me up to the electric meter on the side of the house. And he said, "Do you have a sense of how fast the wheel is turning?" I said, "Sure. It's pretty obvious. And the speed of the wheel is proportional to the amount of power you're using at that moment. So if you turn on the stove, it's going to speed up. If you turn off the stove and turn off the water heater and the furnace and everything, it's going to slow down." So I could see how fast it was going, and he just kind of pointed at it and said, "Now," and it slowed by about a third. And he said, "I did this to my mother's house several months ago, and her bills are still lower."
Hmm.
Well, that's pretty cool. We went into his house, and he had a little black and white cheapy TV on rabbit ears, and he said, "Watch this," and he turned it to a channel that didn't have a station, so it's just snow. And he
Right.
points at the TV and says, "Now," and suddenly he tunes in a station, and
Wow.
it's like, wow, this is pretty astounding. I started feeling the hair go up on the back of my neck a little bit.
Hmm.
He showed me something else in the house, but then we went out to his car, and we were sitting there with it idling, and his conventional ignition, and his hands and feet are off the controls, and he points at the engine and goes, "Now," and he could slow the idle down to the point where it was stalling. And he said, "I can stall other cars in traffic." Well,
Wow.
the final demonstration, we went to the radio station. He was an FM disc jockey for a 50,000 watt station. And we went to the station, and in the back room where all the meters are that give the health and status of the transmitter, there was a digital meter there reading 99.6. And that meant that 99.6% of 50,000 watts was going out the antenna. And he said, "I can lower that." He said, "I can't lower it much or I'll trip it off the air, and I've done it before, but I'll show you." So he said, "Do you see that it's stable at 99.6?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he points at it and he goes, "Now," and it dropped to 99.2. So it
Hmm.
was 0.4% of 50,000 watts plus the overhead power behind it in the transmitter to get that out the antenna. And that's just astounding. And over the years, when we tried different things, especially long distance, it always worked. He always got an effect. I've rarely read, hardly ever, anybody who had the capability to affect things at this level and also to do it reliably, that every time he attempted it, he got an effect.
Hmm.
Well, it forced me to come back, Dave, the rocket scientist, the satellite engineer, it forced me to come back to Denver and say, there's a lot about the universe I don't understand. I've got to go figure this out. And so I got involved with learning how to do energy healing. I took all the coursework through Therapeutic Touch, and I had a very gifted woman who was a middle-aged RN, and her grandmother had been a Native American healer, and so she not only gave us the Therapeutic Touch concepts on energy healing with chakras and energy pathways, but she also gave us a lot of additional material. She even brought in people who had diagnosed illnesses, but she said, "I want you to scan them and tell me what you think they have." And the first one we did, I nailed it. I got that the woman had abdominal problems. She had something in her transverse colon, and she was diagnosed with something that today we'd probably call either Crohn's or IBS.
Hmm.
Uh, but I absolutely nailed it, which was really reassuring to me as the engineer to say, okay, I want to know that this stuff works. Um, Another pathway I took is I got involved in psychic development classes at one of the local metaphysical bookstores, and I ended up meeting three women, and we just all really synced together. And so we met for 2 years. About every 2 weeks, we'd rotate between our houses, and we would try different things on psychic stuff that we'd heard about. Just what
Hmm.
if, what if, what if. The third thing I did was I got involved with a group called the Tibetan Foundation that was channeling ascended masters and then teaching channeling in workshops. And those three things really set me on the path. And so I was Dave, the electrical engineer on aerospace, out at Martin Marietta during the day. And after hours, I was doing healing appointments and other things for other people. And I just kept developing those skills. And then um, I left Lockheed, and Martin became Lockheed. I left him in 2000, went to a small renewable energy company. I kept getting pushed in readings where my guides would come through and say, "You got to step up the game. We really want you to become a phenomenal healer."
Mm-hmm.
And so I really started working on that. In between 2003 and 2007, I'd won some contracts with the Air Force for independent consulting, and a voice had me, it just came down in my head, so I quit that job. It said, "You have all the money you need, all the time you need, go learn everything you can about healing." And so I had a 4-year window there where I could consult on my own time, and so I could take all the classes I wanted. So
Mm-hmm.
I did 2 years of psychic development with the Denver Medium. I learned about 8 or 9 different modalities in healing, and other gifts started coming through, such as very easily reading past lives in the Akashic Records. They just kind of came to me as a download, and things like that. And then moving on, I ended up starting into clearing in 2008 when a woman called me while I was in Las Vegas on vacation and said, "I'm a friend of your daughter's, and I have phenomena going on in my house." She had an entity there that would walk up behind her and say her name. When she was laying in bed, it'd come over and press down on the covers, and her
Wow.
2 preschool kids were seeing witches flying out of closets. And so I said, "Well, I'll give it a shot." And the first pass worked pretty well. And then 2 weeks later, she said, "Something's back." And so I used some other tools I'd learned and was very successful. And that kind of kicked it off where I said, "Okay, I can do clearings long distance. I don't need to go to the site, so I can do them anywhere." And I've always preferred to do it that way because I view
Mm-hmm.
it, I don't want to give the entities any heads up that I'm coming. Uh, and I also don't want to give them an opportunity to attach to me or to set a trap.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just kept moving on. And then in my meditations, I started making contacts with ETs and had several experiences there. And so I continue to work with ETs and help other people who are having um, either conscious ET experiences or they're having experiences which get revealed when I start doing some channeling or mediumship for them to find out what's going on. So I've been very blessed with all these gifts. A lot of my psychic friends, when I was still in aerospace, would call me Clark Kent and Superman, where Clark Kent was a mild-mannered aerospace engineer, and Superman was after hours. And then I pretty much got out of aerospace altogether in 2019. But these,
Yeah.
all those degrees, I picked up 2 other degrees, a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in computer science. I've done a lot of research on the early church to understand what that was all about, to get it out of the dogma and just to see what the honest opinion of it was, what they were trying to do, things like that. So I'm very well read, and I have my own Blog Talk radio show, and I've had over 630 shows there. So I've read many, many, many books of different people and updates to different healing techniques or other things. And um, so it doesn't hurt to have the gray hair. If I have a client whose husband is skeptical, and I just say, "Well, let me talk to him." I think I can either approach this from the science viewpoint, or the quantum mechanics viewpoint, or the religious viewpoint, uh, that type of thing. I think I can, help ease those concerns about why you're coming to me and what we're dealing with. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, I mean, fundamentally, I always tell people, I've been doing this for 40 years now. I wouldn't have kept doing it if it didn't work.
Right.
It works so much of the time that I don't feel like I'm beating my head against the wall to try to make it, produce results. So
Right.
I've
Right.
had a very blessed life in being able to do this work and help others.
You know what gives you a lot of credibility, and I know, back in the old days when we all started ghost hunting and stuff, there was always that misnomer that the people that were doing it, the psychics and everybody that were doing it, we were all flakes. And with you, with your background, working for Boeing and all that, you can't get better than that for credibility,
Yeah, yeah.
because we're not all flakes.
Well, it's, I love to encourage young people to get into all of this on the metaphysics, whatever they're doing. They're meditating, or
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to develop their mediumistic skills, or they're trying to become telepathic, whatever. I love to encourage them because I want all the young people out there to get into this. So as they learn it, maybe it's going to take 5 or 10 years to really get seasoned on their skills, and then
Mm-hmm.
they still have decades and decades left to practice this and help others, versus running into people who are in their 50s or semi-retired and say, well, now I can go look at this. Okay, so they hit 65 when they come into their own, and they don't have that many years left to
Mm-hmm.
practice before the public and help others. So um, but the flip side is, you get somebody who's 25 and says, I'm a psychic medium, and it's people just kind of look at them squinty eyed. I'll be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you kind of young? And so they're always looking for referrals on them and things like that. And so um, there's a trade off on age there. But frankly, I love to encourage young people to get into it. And I also tell them, don't quit your day job. It's going to be quite a while until you build up enough of a client load that you could say, I can be self-supporting on this. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it didn't happen for me where until I hit essentially retirement age. And I was very blessed to have an appearance in 2019 on Coast to Coast, and that really clicked with the listeners, and I picked up about 400 clients out of it.
Wow.
And that's what kicked me to the next plateau. I there's a lot of people who can make this a part-time job, but they're very far away from making a full-time job, and they shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be committing to renting an office and paying marketing costs and things like that.
Sure. 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 Sure.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. I heard you on Coast to Coast last week talking about heaven. Let's talk about heaven a little bit.
Heaven is an interesting place, and I did tell a story on Coast to Coast, and I'll tell it here. But
Okay.
uh, I really started intensely meditating in 2002, and um, I told the guides I really wanted to progress. I said, "Give me exercises, use me as you will. I really want to find out what's going on." And I really started meeting a lot of high vibration beings who would coach me. And like one group of, they call themselves the Lords of the Seven Rays. Each one is associated with a day of the week, and so for a whole year, each morning in my meditation, I'd meet with the one whose day it was. And so um, I did that. And but the first time that I really felt that absolutely I went to a spiritual plane, I've been doing guided meditations for a couple weeks, and I think it was one of the very common guided meditations where, okay, you're in the mountain meadow, you see everything, you feel the grass under your
Mm-hmm.
feet, it's a warm
Mm-hmm.
sky, so it brings in all the senses. And then there's a little cabin in the distance, and there's a door open, and it's
Right.
inviting. So you go down to the cabin, and you go inside, and there's a table with two chairs. You sit
Mm-hmm.
in a chair, a spiritual being shows up in the other chair. Well, I've done this for other people on
Mm-hmm.
giving them a guided meditation, and the spiritual being in the other chair is going to be a product of your imagination when you're starting. Uh,
Sure.
I'll just be honest about that. It's you're kind of greasing the gears, making everything turn easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 2 weeks of doing this, that personage totally shifted, and it was something I knew I hadn't created. And they took my hand and they flew me to the spiritual plane. They just took me up there, and they started giving me a guided tour of all the different buildings and facilities that are available for experiences for people who go to the spiritual plane. And that was fantastic in itself. But one of the best parts about that is, in one of Sylvia Brown's books, she has in the back a bunch of drawings from when she went on a spiritual tour of heaven to see different buildings, and she described them to an artist friend, and the artist friend drew them up. When I looked through those pictures, I could identify about 70% of what she'd drawn because I'd been there, and even down to where the benches were that I sat for a moment. And
Wow.
that was very evidential for me. And I really felt good about understanding what the spiritual plane is. I really like the Robin Williams movie where he dies and then his wife commits suicide and he tries to rescue her from the dark realms or the gray
Sure.
area. Uh, because it really emphasizes that a whole lot of what you experience in the spiritual plane is of your own creation. You have the capability to create things. And in my meditations, when I was meditating intensively, I started creating things. And as long as you revisit them periodically, you'll keep them
Hmm.
energized and they won't fade away. Um, but the thing that you're alluding to that really surprised me. So keep in mind, I grew up in the Episcopal Church. My dad was an Episcopal priest. I didn't realize how much of that culture I had absorbed and how much was in the back of my head
Hmm.
in terms of cultural understandings. But so one of the times that I'm in the spiritual plane and they've created this great big, huge healing pyramid for me. It's like a great big, beautiful glass or crystal pyramid. It could hold thousands and thousands of people and expand as necessary. There really are no physical limitations in the spiritual plane. I was up at the front area, and there was an arrangement shaped like a horseshoe of healing tables, and there were probably half a dozen people that I wanted to work on to do distance healing with, and I would work with them in the same process that I would work with them if I met them and did face to face, hands on healing. And there were archangels there and angels and doctors in spirit, who could help and all kinds of help. And I was trying to work, and all of a sudden I look up and there's ETs standing within the group. And this really shook my understanding because I suddenly realized that I had an expectation that, uh, to a certain degree, God created us in His image, and the heaven that we aspire to is a heaven for people. It's not a heaven for other beings. That's
Right.
our heaven. That's where humans go when they die, and I spent several weeks having lots of discussions with spiritual beings and guides about this. And what really came out is the first thing is there are a number of ETs who are so spiritually evolved that they can instantaneously incarnate and then give up the body. They don't need to go through a birth process, they don't need to go through an incarnation of a soul going into the body or the complications of getting the soul out of the body by having to have the body die. They've surpassed that. And so this really leads to the idea that our heaven and higher vibrational levels of our heaven, and there are multiple layers. I just for ease, I just say, well, there's seven. There could be 29. I don't know, but I've worked at all those levels. Um, but that these ETs, who are very spiritually evolved, can move and interplay within those different layers of what we think of as our heaven, because to them, they're just different vibrational layers.
Hmm.
And so um, they don't necessarily go there to twang people to, say, well, we're going to increase the diversity here. I mean, it's nothing like that. They can mask themselves. So to the average person there, they could appear as a human who was in spirit form, and had that appearance if they needed to or decided to, or realized that psychologically they would be uh, really upsetting some people who were there. I mean, here's another viewpoint. It's very interesting. Um, you carry a lot of psychological inertia with you when you die, and your expectations about what the spiritual plane should be and should act like um, will frequently be manifested for you because you're a co-creator.
Hmm.
So if you are a a full Orthodox Jew and you have an exact idea of what heaven looks like and what God, your relationship to God is going to be, and the expectation that you're still going to follow Mosaic law, you may end up in a community for a long time in the spiritual plane where you're with like-minded people, and you won't be infiltrated by Christians or Muslims or anybody else. The same thing can be true with fundamentalist Christians. It can be true with extremely radical Islamic people,
Mm-hmm.
and others. And just because you go to the spiritual plane doesn't mean that you get tapped on the head and you instantly become a nice person. I mean, if you were a nasty, sharp-tongued person on the planet, who was sarcastic and belittled others, um, it may be a while in the spiritual plane until you catch on that that was not a nice way to live your life and that there are
Mm-hmm.
better ways. And until that happens, you may still be in the spiritual plane as a very unpleasant person. And so that psychological uh, pressure goes forward. The same is true of what are your expectations at death.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you don't believe in a heaven when you died, there's a good chance you're going to be walking the planet still as an earthbound, um, because you just didn't recognize the signs that when the bright light came or the angels came or other guides, you didn't see them for what they were, and you just wondered, well, who are those folks watching me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what's going on here, and you sort of the train leaves the station without you on it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but also, if you're a big deep reader of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and you believe in the Bardo, that you're going to have to battle demons to find your way up the hillside to get into heaven, so you won't have to be reincarnated. That's probably going to be a reality for you when you die, and that's something that I'm not very keen on setting people's expectations for what they're going to run into heaven, other than you're going to be in a form that looks like a younger version of you. You're going to have many guides and relatives there, and it's going to be wonderful living, and you won't lack for anything. You won't have stressors, so you'll be able to go to classes. You'll be able to go sit by the pond. You'll be able to go sailing, whatever you want to do. Those are the expectations I like to put in. And oh, by the way, if you want to pursue spiritual studies, many opportunities with many spiritual beings,
Mm-hmm.
that you can meet. But it's not necessarily an obligation on you that you're going to be on your knees in front of the throne with a guy with a white beard singing hosannas to him all day. If you
Mm-hmm.
think that's what it is, you may experience that for a while until finally you say, after a couple hundred years, waving these fans is getting kind of old. Is there something else here? And an angel steps in and says, anytime you'd wanted, you could have asked to try something
Mm-hmm.
else. And so I think heaven is a wonderful, fascinating place of consciousness. Uh, I think the Creator is a form of consciousness that goes way beyond our thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
the more you meditate, the more progress you make, the more advanced image you're going to have of what the Creator is, and how you can work with that concept. I like one of the quotes that Joseph Campbell had from Schopenhauer, where one of the healthiest spiritual practices you can have is to continue killing off your current creator.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that as you spiritually progress, you're going to release the guy with the white beard, is throwing lightning bolts at the ground, and you're going to get to more and more advanced concepts to the point where you won't be able to explain those to other people, but you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have insights and revelations that um, words just don't do it any justice, of
Mm-hmm.
what the Creator means to you and what your relationship is. So, fantastic opportunity.
Now you mentioned, about different religions being there. I've always thought, as far as the creator goes and whatnot, that he is over all these religions, and and somewhere along the line, he just appears differently to the different religions. Is that correct, or how's that work?
No, that's correct, but keep in mind the Creator never created a religion.
Mm-hmm.
All religions are man-made or person-made. Um, and how many different sects of Christianity are there where, people are arguing, some little minor nuance of things. I mean, the split between the Greek Orthodox Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholics, the final straw was when the Pope put in a thing called the Filioque Clause, which says that, Jesus is the Son of the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused the final rift
Mm-hmm.
between those. Um, but I personally like the fundamental concept of Gnosticism as is practiced around the time of Jesus, where um, they didn't rely on somebody at the front of the group telling you what to think and saying that you can only reach God through me.
Right.
Uh, no, they said, we want you to meditate. We want you to discover what your experience of the Creator is. And as you come across sticking points, we will try to help you work through those and understand them. But basically, it was the kingdom of God is within, which to me is one of my favorite statements out of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
because I truly hold to that. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, religion is nice. It gives a lot of people a starting point. Um, but to me, the failure is I've never heard of a church leader who's ever said to anybody in the congregation, Bob, I wouldn't tell many people this, but you're doing so great on spirituality. I think you've outgrown our church and you ought to move on to maybe these spiritual teachers. You
Mm-hmm.
never hear that because every church
Mm-hmm.
says, we're good from cradle to grave and please keep the donations coming.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
that to me is a fundamental failure of our religious institutions is there's no acknowledgement that you can progress to the point where you've outgrown their basic truths or dogmas.
You talked when you first started talking about heaven. You talked about buildings. What what are these buildings?
Oh, there's buildings in the spiritual plane for inventing. Why do we have people on the planet who, 10 different people get the same idea for a cool new latest
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly it becomes a race to the patent office for all of them? Um, it's because the concept was created and developed in the spiritual plane in a great big hall of inventors of where new stuff comes from. And the same is true on most of the famous artworks, Mona Lisa and others. Um, when you when you die and go into spirit, you'll be able to go see the originals for those artworks and be able to talk to the people who created those and inspired people here. The same is true of great works of literature with their themes. Um, One that really comes through on that one for me is I believe that so many people who've been creating screenplays for movies like E.T. or Close Encounters or Star Trek or Star Wars, um, they've truly been inspired to create these works because I think they're trying to coach people to not be afraid of sentient beings who look different from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see a very interesting message in things like Star Wars, where just because they look human doesn't mean that they're good, and just because they
Mm-hmm.
don't look human doesn't mean that they're bad. You
Right.
don't know. You have to drop this idea that an appearance is linked to their intention, and I believe that these all came out of the spiritual plane for inspiration. Um, there are art places, there are literature places, there are places where they put on dramatic acts, including having some of the original people in historical settings reenact the history. Like, you might be invited to a thing where you can see the signing of the Declaration of Independence with most of
Mm-hmm.
the authors there. Something like that. You might go see what happened, the true story of the Passion of Jesus, at
Mm-hmm.
the end, uh, to see that because, wow, I've always wondered that. They have extensive libraries with all this information that's unvarnished truth. It's not shaded by opinion or
Mm-hmm.
guessing. They have the Akashic Records there. Um, Gosh, music performances, all these things. They have lots of social opportunities. I mean, the main thing that you won't find there, you'll see a lot of houses that people are living in that look like suburbia. Um, but they don't have sidewalks and they don't have streets and they don't have vehicles because you just think yourself from here to there to go visit somebody. And in your house, you won't have a bathroom. You don't have those type of physical functions. You can have a kitchen, so you can choose to eat, but you don't need to eat. And if you go out and you're wearing a robe and you jump in a lake, as soon as you get out of the lake, the robe's dry. Everything is self-correcting there for perfection. So uh, it'll be a fantastic experience.
Hmm.
I think the level of perfection can be so high that it can become attractive for some people to take on incarnations because they want to add some salt and pepper and spice to their life, and
Hmm.
they they end up incarnating and sort of going on an African safari adventure. And yeah, the bugs might be bad, and there might be wild animals out there, and maybe some of the people in your group get killed. Uh, but it was a fantastic experience that you will carry with you always as a learning thing on what you're made of. How strong is your backbone? That type
Hmm.
of thing.
Hmm.
So I see our Earth planet, based on my experiences of traveling all over the universe. I see this as being one of the roughest, toughest places in the universe, and I see it as being kind of equivalent to boot camp. I don't think Earth was ever meant to be a paradise. I don't think Earth was ever meant to be easy.
Hmm.
A few people get vacation lifetimes here where, yeah, they do have plenty of money or they live in a very benign environment like down in the South Pacific somewhere where really no natural enemies or anything. But for the most part, people come here to have different experiences working with different people
Hmm.
and being confronted by challenges that they have to work their way through. And so I think if a lot more people adopted the viewpoint that, wow, I'm here and I am blessed to have these problems to solve. This
Hmm.
is a challenge for me. I'm on a game show. I'm being watched.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, that rather than just saying, "Oh my God, what did I do to you, God? Why are you punishing me? Why do I have the trials of Job?"
Hmm.
That defeatist attitude, and it's like, no, you're being poked with a sharp stick, so you'll up your game, and if more people accepted that, then I think people would feel a lot more sense of accomplishment from having been here.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had a child die. What a challenge. I learned from it. I ended up working with other people. That type of thing rather than, oh my God, what kind of merciful God would take my baby away from me?
Right,
You know,
right.
I think that question is very defeatist.
Absolutely. Now, when you enter heaven, upon dying, what is the process? Because I mean, there's stories of you see these visions of sitting with Saint Peter and going over all your life, or people say that their life passes before them. What is the process, the transition process?
For most people, apparently, so they get guided to the spiritual plane, and then on a timeline that they select, but it's kind of mandatory. You will do it sometime, but you
Hmm.
could space it out over 10 years. You could do it in the first week. You could wait 3 months to start it. Uh, you're going to have a life review. And if you picture a man cave that's filled with TV screens and all types of video playback, you're able to scroll through your life and you're able to see his experiences. And something that Daniel Brinkley brought out, and I've found references to it from other people now too, is the
Hmm.
idea that when you're doing these life reviews, you can be emotionally put into the other person's shoes to feel and hear what they're thinking when you did what you do with them. And
Hmm.
this is not a punishment. This is a loving, guided review of your life to see what your report card is and how well you did the things you planned on doing. And there really is no punishment. I'm going to put in my little quick pitch for what hell is. Um,
Sure.
um, One of my experiences back in 2006 was I was taken to like a castle courtyard, and they opened up a trap door, and I went down these steps, and I was like in a hallway of a dungeon, and I was with my spiritual guides. And we walked down a long hallway, came up to a great big heavy door, and we pulled it open. And there was a guy in there who's strapped to some apparatus being tortured by demons. I said, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And they said, if you die and if you believe in hell and you have an image of what hell looks like, and if you believe that you belong in hell, the Creator says yes. And you will create your own hell. And I really came to understand that there really is not an objective hell. You put yourself there. And so they had me work with this guy to develop a protocol for getting these people out of their personal hells. And I've been doing that ever since. And I've done it on a large scale basis. I also work with people who are stuck in purgatory. To me, that's a false belief. And also with people stuck in limbo. That's another false belief for a spiritual realm that kind of holds you away from the pleasures of being back in the spiritual plane. And so this thing about hell, it's just not there. So going back to the life review room, so you aren't being punished. You're just being guided to understand and to learn from your experiences. And they know people are going to screw up. I mean, this is very few people go through high school perfectly. They have learning opportunities, and it's very important that they do, because it will make a lot more sense to them if they get in trouble for something and have to think about it than if they just coast through and never push the limit and figure out where the limit is. Just like some of the football coaches tell their teams, we don't learn much from a winning game. We learn the most from a game where we lose, and we review the tapes and look at where people miss their assignments and things. And the same thing is true for this life review. So it's not something to be feared. It's something to say, yeah, this is a process I want to go through, and I want to savor it and understand it. And if I can in some degree, I'll try to make amends for some of these things. I think it's out of this that we end up with these dejected people who show up at seances or mediumship sessions where the abusive father shows up, and he's kind of hanging in the background, and medium says, well, your father's here, and he's got his hat in his hands, figuratively. He wants to apologize. He said he just didn't understand what he was doing, when he abused you, that type of thing. And they do understand after they go through that life review process of how the other person felt. And now they're, from their viewpoint, in a mostly helpless position to do anything about it other than to possibly have an opportunity to spiritually come through and ask for forgiveness.
It's very interesting. How long? Okay, I've heard that there's a process for a soul to, a time process for. I mean, it's like you say, like when you were talking the first part of the show about, say, the Muslims that are there and stuff, and everybody eventually ends up on the same page with things. How long does it take for that full transition to occur? Because you die, you go through your life, that life review process, and then what happens after that? Are you left alone, or are there guides to help you through?
Yeah, there are several variations on this. Life review process can be 3 days in our clock time. It could be 6 months or 2 years in our clock time. And another thing that happens is, again, there are some people who get cocooned when they die. What this means is that when they first go to the spiritual plane, they're not psychologically prepared to see themselves. Oh, pardon me. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
They're not prepared to see themselves in a fresh, new, young body. It's too much of a psychological impact. So they go into a sham hospital. They're surrounded by fake doctors, fake nurses, fake visitors. They think they're on the road to healing and being treated. And this process may last 3 days, it may last 2 months. And then they finally reach the point where they seem to be psychologically able, without shock, to be told that, yes, your physical body did die and you are now in the spiritual plane and you're going to have a fresh new body, and nothing can hurt it. And
Mm-hmm.
this is great. And there's a whole lot of people waiting to have a party for you to welcome you home. Um, and so that's a great thing. This is also a reason why sometimes mediums, you go to see a medium, you say, my dad died last week. Can you bring him through? And the medium will normally say, I can't guarantee anybody I can bring through. And they may get into the session, they may say, your dad's just not available. Well, why is he not available? Because he's been cocooned. He isn't prepared to take on the responsibility of communicating with you or acknowledging that he's dead. And so that can happen.
That was one of the questions I had. You just answered it, because I see, and I'm not going to mention names, okay, but I've seen professed psychics
Yeah.
contacting deceased celebrities right away,
Yeah.
after they pass. And I've always wondered, well, is there a time to do that? Is it too soon, to try and contact right away? Should there be a waiting period?
I would say normally you're probably safe after 3 months of trying to contact somebody who's passed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've seen very, very few take longer than that to be available.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry.
Allergies. They're bad this
The
time of
other
year
thing,
now.
the other thing too is that many people who are going to the spiritual plane are now getting very rapid training on how to communicate with humans. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the big things that's happened is with our society going so technological and so electronically based, they are learning how to do things to get our attention with electronics.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're learning how to put characters on a computer screen. They're learning how to do something to our cell phone. They're learning how to turn our lights on and off. They're learning how to manipulate our TV channel or our radio, what's coming through. You know, they're learning this. It used to be you find pennies dropped, you find dimes dropped, you
Right.
find little feathers, things like that. Um, and that's they've advanced, and many newbies in the spiritual plane are learning very rapidly how to manipulate our reality just a little bit to let us know that they are here and they're watching. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when somebody dies, uh, they may be in a position where uh, they they want to come back and they want to watch the funeral process, and because they do want to hear what people had to say about them. They're curious, who's going to show up, how many people, what are they, and suddenly they find themselves, they can hear other people's thoughts. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that in some cases that's probably a feel good feeling. In other cases, it's like, I'm not getting, good feelings out of this. This is kind of disappointing. Kind of like when Scrooge goes, through his Night of the Three Ghosts on Christmas Carol, uh, to hear what people are saying about him after he dies, and to figure out that it's him that they're insulting. Um, Now, for people who don't understand the process to go to the spiritual plane, they may follow the funeral, they may go out to the burial site, they may see the casket going into the ground, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody gets in their cars and leaves, and they're sitting there saying, what's next? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why you find a lot of earthbound spirits hanging around cemeteries, uh,
Interesting.
because everybody departs and they don't know where to go.
Right.
Uh, and it's kind of like they're waiting at the bus station for the bus to come, and the bus isn't going to show up for them. Um, but for the people who are in a healthy shape, it's kind of like they get their first taste of the spiritual plane, and then they say, "Okay, we're going to give you a temporary pass to go back and see what's going on, with your burial process for closure."
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you sometimes see, and it's happening more and more now. Raymond Moody just came out with another book on it, on proof of life after death, where he
Mm-hmm.
talks about these death experiences from observers at the death scene, where um, he talks about one where the mother is dying, and the people in the room all see her husband, who's already dead. He
Mm-hmm.
shows up to the point where he is fully appears to be physical to 2 out of 3 people there, and then he fades as she comes out of her body and goes to the spiritual plane. So, um, how did he learn how to do that? Well, he's had a few years in the spiritual plane to practice, and he's prepared. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One of my other psychic gifts that I've worked on is being what's called a psychopomp. It's an ancient Greek term, and it means that if I'm asked or if I see a need, I accompany spirits to the spiritual plane so they don't get confused or misplaced or lost. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do have a number of my close friends saying, I've either lost a relative or I'm about to lose a relative. Would you mind, helping to make sure that they get over crossover safely? And yeah, I'm happy to do it. That's the best outcome for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about ETs.
Okay,
Are they among us, or what's going on with that?
they are everywhere. I believe that you can very simply categorize the ETs around us into three groups: the ones that are helpful, trying to maintain rules, trying to keep us from being interfered with by the bad guys. A very large group who I just call the passive ones. They want to watch. They want to witness what we're going through as we go through our spiritual evolution and possibly shift to higher vibrations of Earth. And then we have some of the dark bad guys who are unpleasant and messing around with some of the dark groups of people on the planet, with toys and weapons. Um, but I've seen an evolution. All this stuff is evolving, and we started hearing about ETs forming hybrids, and this was back in the '60s and '70s when the abductions and the harvesting of eggs and sperm all was big in the news,
Mm-hmm.
and so we did end up with hybrids, and I've seen a few of them. Typically, what I've seen is women in their 25 to 35 range, dressed to the nines, dressed too nice, inappropriately nice for the conference or meeting they're sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start noticing them and they feel you looking, they quickly throw on dark glasses and leave. Their eyes are a little bit different, where frequently the eyes will be, I'll say, in some way, it's kind of like they're more wider at the outside edge, so it's kind of like they're almost a triangle coming in, rather than what we have, which is two curves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they're around, but now one of the things that I worked with is I started finding about 10, 11 years ago that people were being energetically hybridized. And so now I muscle test to see what percentage of people, what are their percentages in terms of human versus ET versus angelic, and a number of other categories. Um, because I see that the ETs have evolved and advanced on that. Now, are there still ETs out there who are doing nasty experiments on some people? Yeah, probably. There are plenty of other shows that talk about that and what they're doing, and I don't know the scope of how many are doing it, but I don't see
Mm-hmm.
a big need for it. But the flip side is, I find many of the ETs are getting sophisticated, where again they can alter or change their appearance, or maybe change our mental thinking about what their appearance is.
Mm-hmm.
So they blend in, they watch, they mingle among us. You might see them on one row of the grocery store, and they look like a homeless person, and you're embarrassed to catch yourself staring at them, and you
Mm-hmm.
go to the next aisle, and they're gone. They're not in the store anymore. They've disappeared. Uh, Things like that. So I think there's a lot around us. When I've muscle tested to see how many are out there, I've gotten numbers as high as 3 or 4% of a large group of people of who you would see on the street or in a gathering. 3 to 4% of those are not normal humans. There's something else, and so I think they're there. As I said, in many cases they're here to be helpful, but other cases they're here just to watch. They want to see what's going to happen. I think one of their big fears is, and I think they would intervene at this point if we started trying to launch some nuclear weapons in
Mm-hmm.
warfare. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think they would be interfered with and would malfunction at this point. Um, I had a very vivid dream that turned into something. This is not a dream. This is a reality on another place. And
Hmm.
as an Air Force base on another version of Earth, and I was there when all the jets were being scrambled, and there's all kinds of activity, and then suddenly the nuclear weapons hit, and I could see the sky glowing from it, and bad things. I said, "What are you showing me?" And talking to my spiritual guys, and they said, "This experiment on Earth is the third time we've tried it because the previous two destroyed themselves. So there's very high stakes to make sure we don't screw it up this time."
Hmm.
So we're getting lots of help so we don't go down a slippery slope and destroy the planet.
When you talk about this muscle test, describe it to me.
Well, a lot of people are familiar with kinesiology. They've had their arms, pressed down,
Hmm.
to see if they're strong or weak. Um,
Right.
when I do a lot of work using a derivative of muscle testing and core beliefs. And
Hmm.
I was taught to have a person on a massage table with their arm up in the air. And if you do it that way, you can test a person for an hour and their shoulder doesn't get tired.
Sure.
Um, but in 2009, I started working, doing readings in stores and at fairs. And there's no way to have a table there and take the time to test somebody. So I started using a pendulum. I'm very fast with the pendulum on muscle testing, or
Hmm.
to get answers. And
Sure.
um, but I said I need something even faster than that. And so there's some two-handed muscle testing techniques like this one where you try to break the circle, or this one where you try to break the circle. So if it's
Hmm.
strong, true, or yes, you can't break it. If it's weak or false, you break it.
Hmm.
And but still, you walk around in a store doing this, and people look at you funny. If you're testing vitamins, mommy, what's that man doing over there? It's like uh, I don't need that. And so
Hmm.
I learned how to do it on my hands, where I press up with my thumb and down with my index finger and try to slide my finger off my thumbnail. So it's sort of like an old time term they call a stick plate, where you slide a finger on a glossy surface like an agate
Hmm.
or on a formica table. Only I'm using my thumbnail, and I learned how to do it on my right hand and got very good with it. Then I thought, well, I can't write. I have to keep picking up the pen and putting it back down. So I learned how to do it on my left hand. So I can do it on either hand now. And so basically, it's a yes no answer from my point of view with high confidence in the outcome. But I test many, many different things. And I test on numerical scales, I test on quantities. Um, I do a lot of business consulting for people on who they're dealing with in upcoming deals and what are the likely outcomes. I do a lot of work with realtors on
Hmm.
when are offers going to come in, when's the house going to sell, all doing this type of thing. And I will tell you that nobody's 100% correct, and I'll never present myself as 100% correct.
Right.
Uh, but uh, again, I hark back to Sylvia Brown on something else she said. One of her books, she said, in my mediumship sessions, on a good day, I'm 60 to 80% correct, and on a great day, I'm 90% correct. And she never said she was 100% correct. So I always work with young people who are getting into this and just say, don't set too high expectation that you're going to be perfect. I said, if I was perfect, there'd be a line out my door a mile long of people who want me to give them the answers. And the really bad thing was they would quit living their lives for their own purposes. They would come to rely on me, and I don't want that. So we just had this question.
Yes.
I kind of missed it. Can you
Yes.
remind me?
Get it back up right now. Question from the chat room. There we go.
Are humans on the menu for the dark ETs? I've heard those stories that we have these great big underground facilities out at Denver International Airport. I'm from Denver, uh, where they collect children, and the children are taken by some of these dark ETs and they're eaten. And for me, the jury is still out. I don't know enough about that. And
Hmm.
um, The other thing too is I caution people that when they're learning how to do remote viewing or other things, I tell them, yes, there are ET bases on the moon, and yes, there are reptilians on the moon. Don't go peeking and sniffing because they can detect you, they will follow you back, and they can create havoc for you psychically.
Hmm.
Uh, I feel kind of the same way about pursuing any of these stories about what the bad ETs do. Do they
Right.
actually enslave humans and put them on slave colonies? Do they kidnap people? This type of thing. I don't really go there. I'd be hard pressed to say I know anybody who has personal experience of it, in some form. So I don't know. I think the jury's out. I'm I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that spiritual beings and advanced ETs, keep us from being afflicted with that type of thing.
Now, you mentioned also earlier about how we how we get our ETDNA, and you mentioned that it was more of a mental thing, or how'd that work?
Um, well, I believe that fundamentally our human DNA is composed of many different strands that come from different ET races. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're sort of a mongrel, but the flip side is I think we've gotten the best aspects of many different races, given our level of development. I certainly don't think that we're a chance evolutionary development here. I think that there was a hominid that made it pretty far, but then I think his ET got upgraded, or not ET, his DNA got upgraded and
Mm-hmm.
uh, became very much who we are today in terms of sentient human beings. Um, there are people who are challenging the strictly evolution of things, saying we just don't have enough billions of years on this planet of this evolution to account for the beneficial changes that would have to happen to make all this stuff come true on what we have. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Darwin said two things. He said, I can't explain how all these things came together to give us eyes. He said, the
Right.
combination of a lens, an iris, and a retina. He said, it's just, you got to be astronomical, the odds of having that happen spontaneously. And he
Mm-hmm.
also felt the same way about flowers. He said, there's no real way evolutionary wise to explain flowers because they're so complex. Um, so, um, yeah, I think we've had a lot of beneficial pushing on us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've heard that one mistake though that was in our background was the idea of viruses.
Okay.
Viruses were never meant to come here. Somehow they got here, and there is no such thing as a good virus for us. There's no beneficial virus that you can point to.
So are there a lot of ETs, hanging out with us on Earth? Because, like you say, there's the good ETs, there's the not so nice ETs. So is it like we're going to find out that someday I'm going to go walk across the street and it's my neighbor across the street, or is it that frequent?
Yeah, yeah. It's I think one of these things. If you put out the good vibes, if you put out the expectation as you walk around on a day-to-day basis that I acknowledge the fact that there are ETs around me and they are hiding in plain sight, um, I think you will have opportunities to see them at work. I think you
Mm-hmm.
will have opportunities to say, no, I can't believe that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
That can't be ordinary people doing that. I mean, the story that I have along those lines is my wife and I went out for an iced tea in the evening, and while we were waiting to make a left turn to get to the driveway for McDonald's, across on the other side of the intersection, there was a fender bender, and a sedan hit the back of a pickup truck. And well, we figured we were a block or two away from a fire station. They'll be there almost immediately. We went ahead and went through the drive-through at McDonald's, got our iced teas, and then sat sort of on a little raised area overlooking where the accident site was. And I finally just told my wife, I do have some first aid training going back to my scuba diving days. I said, I want to go down and check. I'm just concerned that somebody's hurt there.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked down, and in the sedan there were four older women and gray hair, looking like they were wearing suits that would be more appropriate for women in the 1960s or 70s, um, rather than current, for any type of social event. And I come up to the driver and said, "Are you okay?" And she kind of is nervous and looks around a little bit and says, "Well, I think so." And I said, "Well, I think you better turn off your car. That'd be a good idea." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, you're right." She turns it off. And then I'm looking at the other women all of a sudden, and I realize they look like they're cookie cutter, products.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started tumbling to the fact these are ETs. I asked the driver, I said, well, what happened in the accident? She said, well, I was driving down the street and I was following the median, and suddenly the median went left for the left turn lane. I didn't realize it, and it's too late for me to swerve and go around the truck. And so I hit the
Mm-hmm.
truck. Okay,
Wow.
what normal driver gauges where they're supposed to drive on a street by matching the median?
Right.
You use the stripes. You use other cues about where your car should be. She was
Mm-hmm.
following the median,
Mm-hmm.
and it just hit me. Well, these are ETs, and they checked out some costumes from Central Casting and got a car somewhere and went out for a joyride and got busted. you
Funny.
know.
That's
Um,
funny.
and it still took a while more for any emergency vehicles to show up. And I talked to the other driver. He's, poor guy was just found out that his cancer that had been in remission was coming back that day, and then have his car or have his truck, hit in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Bad day for him. And so I tried to calm him down. But yeah, these ETs are among us, and we used to hear the stories about, be careful how you treat like homeless people or others who are destitute because they could be angels in disguise. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
think in a lot of cases they can be ETs in disguise too. Um, they're very likely not to be confronted or even looked at much. They become very hidden if they take on the guise of homeless people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because most people are taught, you don't stare at people who look different. That's rude. And so I think they use that to their advantage to keep from being stared at and notice that, if I look really close at your face, you don't have a normal human looking face. There's something, the proportions are wrong here or something. Well, if they're a homeless person wearing a stocking cap and they're kind of grubby, you aren't going to scrutinize them enough to get a feeling for it.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
yeah, they're out there. They're among us.
Last question. Do you think the government is ever going to tell us the truth about all this?
I think they're going to be forced to. We had that revelation several weeks ago where the guy was a consultant hired by the government to look at this
Mm-hmm.
question. And he came back and he said, I've seen stuff, experienced stuff, seen stuff in different departments. Yes, they're here. He was unequivocal about it. He didn't say they might be here, it might be suggestive. No, he said they're they're here. We've seen this. We
Mm-hmm.
know that they're here, and it's not our technology. And so I think they're going to have to acknowledge it. I think we still have a little bit more squeaky room to get past the point of where people might still be too reactive if they
Mm-hmm.
see it. But again, I think all of the sci-fi movies, all the different things, the dramas are getting us to the point where we're very relaxed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I look at what's happened on the views of psychic work, in early '80s. If I'd mentioned I was an energy healer out at in an aerospace company,
Mm-hmm.
they think I had three eyes and try to get rid of me. It's
Absolutely.
Dave's nuts.
Absolutely.
Um, in 2015, if I said in an aerospace company, yeah, I do alternative healing because some people are unhappy with Western medicine. Oh yeah, that's fine. I can go along with that. So these attitudes are shifting, and I think we just need to get just a little bit farther along where uh, they have the comfort factor that our knee jerk reaction isn't for Joe the country farmer to grab his
Mm-hmm.
shotgun and take care of the thing that has looks like a praying mantis. You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
I think we need to get to that point. Yeah.
Right. So how can people find you, sir?
DaveTheMystic.com. You find out all about what I do. I have a lot of little video recordings on there about the different services I offer, and I've been doing it a long time, and I've got many satisfied clients. I've probably done over 3,000 clearings, so it's yeah. I'd be happy to help people out there who have challenges.
Fantastic. Dave, it's always fun to have you on. I loved every second of it, and I hope maybe you can join us at a later date as well.
Absolutely. Well, just call me up whenever you want me to be on again with whatever topic. I'm always happy to talk, as you can
Sounds
tell.
absolutely. But it's fun to talk to you. I mean, I learned so much when I talk to you. It's great. It's fun.
Well, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Well, you have a rest of a great evening, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks so much.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Okay, guys, it's always fun to have Dave on. Always informative. I learned a lot. I think you guys did too. Again, tomorrow's kind of up in the air. I have an MRI coming up at like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., and I have issues with that. Like I said, I have an inner ear thing going on, and it really knocks me out of sorts to where I'm dizzy. So I don't know if it'll be palpable to do a live show tomorrow. But if it is, I'll either have a guest on, I have somebody lined up, or I'll be reading, or we'll do a best of. It just depends how I feel after I get back from that appointment. But I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It was fun. It's always fun having Dave on. And if you guys have any ideas for shows that guests that you'd like to see and hear, let me know. Because if we do it, then I will send you a California Haunts Radio T-shirt. Okay, it's kind of fun, huh? If you do suggest somebody, we put them on. Yeah, we'll get you a T-shirt. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I'll see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, one way or another. But I will put an announcement on ahead of time. Okay, so we'll just see what happens. So I'll see you guys. Remember, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hate the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. We're just trying to get the word out. Show me some love, happy faces, likes, and all that good stuff. Thank you very much for coming, and I will see you tomorrow.